Going to go back to Israel once again, bring you a little bit more on that. In the newspaper review with Alison's, those early election results there. So far, we've got no clear winner once again.
That's right, sir. Once again, no political bloc got an outright majority, although the Jerusalem Post on their front page writes that Netanyahu is on the cusp of a right-wing coalition. The paper explains that that coalition would rely on Naftali Bennett, a former Netanyahu ally turned opponent, and Israel's left-wing paper Haaretz today is begging Bennett not to join Netanyahu. The paper notes that Bennett quite ambiguously said after the exit polls, "I'll do only what's good for Israel." Haaretz writes in their editorial, Bennett doesn't need anyone to tell him that the power has corrupted Netanyahu and that his continued rule is not good for Israel. Now, another thing you might say is not so good for Israel is having 4 elections in 2 years. There's a cartoon from Haaretz that sums up what many people might be feeling. This woman says, "I'm going to bed, wake me up on Friday for the final results." You can see clearly they're not expecting to have clarity anytime soon.
A nice big yawn as well. Well, we'll be following, of course, those political developments in Israel. But for now, let's turn to the US. There, the country is really reeling from its second mass shooting in less than a week.
That's right, Stuart. The latest one was at a grocery store in Boulder, Colorado. It came just a week after the shooting outside of Atlanta. We're seeing a lot of cartoons like this one from Bill Bramhall of the New York Daily News. We can see it surrounded by dead bodies there. The coronavirus is saying things are getting back to normal, I see. We're also seeing a lot of cartoons like this next one from Walt Handelsman, linking the tragedy in Boulder, Colorado, to the unmovable Boulder that is the Republican Party represented by that elephant when it comes to stricter gun control laws.
And Alison, Joe Biden's called for measures, including a ban on assault rifles, hasn't he? I mean, what are the chances that things could be different under the Democrats in the White House?
Well, that's really the big question, Stuart, and the New York Times is trying to answer it today. But you can see from the paper's headline that they're not very hopeful that the gun control debate is actually going to go anywhere. Now, they note that the democratically controlled House recently passed 2 bills to strengthen background checks, and they note that 4 out of 5 Americans do support measures like those ones. Still, it's incredibly unlikely to pass in the Senate, the paper says, where it would need votes from at least 10 Republicans. One potential consensus point, the paper says, is that red flag laws are something politicians might be able to agree on. Now, those are laws in which family members and law enforcement officials are able to restrict a person's access to guns if they believe that that individual is potentially dangerous.
Morocco, for this next story. A well-known dissident there has been freed from prison.
That's right. This is Maâti Monjib. He is a historian, a journalist, and a defender of human rights. Moroccan magazine Tel Quel reminds us that he was charged with fraud and attacks on state security and sentenced to 1 year of prison back in January. Now, neither he nor his lawyers were actually present at this trial when he was sentenced. He had been on a hunger strike since early March, and his liberation comes after a huge mobilization from international rights groups. Now, France's Catholic paper La Croix writes that for those rights groups, there was no doubt that Monjib was a victim of arbitrary detention and judicial harassment. The paper cites his lawyers, who call him one of the most emblematic, critical voices of the Moroccan regime. La Croix notes that he's also not the only journalist in Morocco being silenced. They say others do remain behind bars there.
And our last stories have to do with animals and the press review. We're going to take you, first of all, to India. Tens of thousands of people there have admitted to owning exotic pets.
That's right, Stuart, and I wish I could show you a list of some of those pets, but unfortunately we don't have it. Indian website The Scroll, though, says that they likely include kangaroos, lemurs, iguanas, and exotic birds like parakeets. We can see a total of over 32,000 people came forward to declare these animals. You can imagine quite a menagerie. The website explains that this was part of a voluntary disclosure scheme announced by the Indian government back in June in the wake of the coronavirus pandemic, because the likelihood that COVID-19 came from animals really raised concerns about the unregulated trade of exotic wildlife. Conservationists really hope that this is a step forward in India for strengthening wildlife conservation laws.
And in fact, wildlife lovers may also be rather pleased with this last story. 2 dolphins spotted swimming where? somewhere important, the Grand Canal of Venice.
That's right, Stuart. And if this story sounds familiar to you, that's because this was circulating as fake news last year during the first coronavirus lockdown. This time, though, as Italy is back on lockdown, it is for real. These dolphins were seen. They were filmed,
Amazing.
caught on video on Monday. One is believed to have been an adult, the other a juvenile. There was a bit of concern about danger to the dolphins from boat propellers, but apparently they are believed to have made it safely back to the Adriatic Sea where they came from. One of the men who captured the video, he's one of the guys you see here in this local paper. He said he was happy to make people smile during this difficult period, and I'm glad that this time we're smiling and it's for real.
It's about the only time I think that fake news has eventually proved to be correct, even if it was a year later. Very nice story. Thank you very much for bringing it to us, Alison. Sergeant there with a press review for you.